now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. Are there is anybody besides Luke? Okay.
One person. Two.
Woohoo! How's everybody doing this afternoon? It's good to, I guess, see you all, even though we can't really see you. I think you can see us. Welcome back to Waking Up Past COVID, Business Ownership and Handling the Imposter Syndrome, Part 2. I am, again, Matt Connell from Goodwin University. And this is my amazing colleague, Dr. Coyne-Gilbert, also from Goodwin University. As we opened up yesterday, we had these 3 questions up that Sandy had kind of read to you to get you to start thinking about. I just want to put them up for a quick second if you can see the screen. Do you have difficulty in accepting compliments or praise about your intelligence or accomplishments? Do you feel your success or success before COVID was due to some kind of luck? Do you feel afraid that people important to you or your business may find out that you are not as capable as they think you are? And I think that yesterday we had some really good questions come up at the end, and we want to kind of jump into that. I'm going to let Sandy take over from here.
Okay. So we had a few questions yesterday, and we were really impressed by them. So our agenda today is to find out, first of all, if there were any other questions that people might have had, which maybe they thought about overnight and they'd like to bring up. And then we can move from that into talking about your experiences. We really want to get a little bit more personal today, and we recognize we have a session that's 30 minutes long. So we want to make sure that we make use of every minute. And then, you know, a question that was asked was about success. We'd like to talk about that. And if you're not feeling the imposter syndrome, what can you learn from it? And then finally, where do we go from here? And provide you with our contact information, because we believe, both Matt and I believe, that discussion should always continue. And so are there any questions from yesterday that we could potentially answer for you?
I think, Joni, if they put them in the chat, you'll read them to us. Is that correct?
Yes, they can put them in the questions box, but I'm not seeing anything so far. Oh, wait a minute.
What?
I just got one in. Is dealing with others, not me, who are not feeling the imposter syndrome. And if that person is your boss, what do you do?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, you cracked a little.
You cracked up a little bit.
Okay. The question is, in dealing with others who are not feeling the imposter syndrome, and if that person is your boss, what do you do?
All right, so the way I would hear this question, and correct me if I'm wrong, but other people are not feeling the impact of the imposter syndrome, but maybe you are. And so are they disconnected from you, and how do you handle that? Is that fairly accurate? So
yes, that's it.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Excellent. All right. So there's the absolute opposite of the imposter syndrome. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you believe everything is perfect about you. And you tend to believe information, you tend to believe ideas and thoughts without any confirmation or without anything to really back it up. Now, for working with someone who doesn't understand where you are, it might be an important consideration to figure out how to have the conversation about where you are. You might not want to mention the imposter syndrome. Maybe the person wouldn't be open to that right away, but to start by talking about COVID, putting things in that reference, and then talking about, here's how I'm feeling. As I coach people, I always tell them, start with how you feel. Don't say, you know what you do, or you this. Don't talk with yous, talk with I's. Nobody can dispute how you feel. And so if you start there, there's a potential of a dialogue. A lot of this is also based on the quality of the relationship that you have. What COVID has really done in many places is strip away the veneer of civilized, relationships and brought us face to face with how we really feel, and an inability to cover it with a mask. So things bubble up to the surface a lot more easily than they did before. So is it, what kind of relationship do you have with your boss? Can you tell the boss how you feel? Can you couch it in terms of it's a right now thing? I'm not diminishing the fact that the imposter syndrome is not necessarily just today. But I think for most of us, we need to look at things just for now. You can't compare it to before. You can't compare it to where we're going, just for now, because that's a lot sometimes for folks. I don't know, Matt, what do you think?
Well, I think Sandy, as you said so many important things, and I love the concept of of starting with I statements, right? Because even if somebody kind of poo-poos it, nobody can invalidate your feelings, right? And so they might not listen to them. That's different than but at the end of the day, really, you can't allow anybody to invalidate your feelings. So if you start it as an I statement as opposed to a you, right away, you're taking them off guard to some degree, because it's not an accusatory statement at all. I would ask, in my mind, one follow-up question that I have is sometimes our bosses, especially if they're acting solely as bosses or managers and not leaders, are the reason for our imposter syndrome, right? They're a contributing factor to our imposter syndrome. So I'm curious as to whether or not part of what you're feeling is based on the relationship you're having with this individual. And then that becomes a different kind of scenario as to how you need to reflect and handle that. So I'm curious as to if you have any sense, like, do you feel as if it's internal that these feelings are bubbling up from, or external pressures, or the way you're perceiving external communication to be coming at you?
One important thing to remember is Simon Sinek, who's a tremendous leadership theorist, says that bosses get titles, leaders get people. And just because somebody's in charge doesn't mean they're a leader, or at least not a leader that you need. I would say that. And the second thing that I would say is that it's always important to remember that there is absolutely no one that we encounter, including our bosses, who are not suffering from trauma that is based. This is a different trauma environment than we've ever seen. And this is trauma that has to do with lack of agency. You are not capable to do whatever you choose to do whenever you choose to do it. There are mandates that have limited our ability to move around the planet. And we've started to recognize the impact of that in small and large ways. What that means is a boss who might have been tolerable before COVID is intolerable now. People do not leave their position because of their work. Typically, they leave because of the person they report to.
I agree. So I'm curious as to, and I didn't catch the name of the person that was asking the question. I apologize. So I'm curious if there's any follow-up to that as to, what they're thinking, their thoughts are at this point, whether it's internal, external, a combination of both. If there's any other questions as well.
We do have one other question. How can I stop undercutting myself? I lower my prices before the client even asks.
Can I ask a quick follow-up before I respond? And I'm curious as to how long this person has been in business, engaging clients.
30
The lowest?
years.
30
30
years.
years.
Okay.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Sandy, do you want to start off?
I would say the whole process of undercutting yourself is mired in a whole lot of other questions that we could ask. First thing that I think of is when you undercut yourself, it's because you're not sure of what your value is. The fact that you've been in business for 30 years, first of all, I am incredibly proud of you for asking this question, because sometimes we think we should just get over something if we've done it for a while. There shouldn't be any reason to feel that. But that's not human. Human encounters, every encounter is different. And as a result, every client is different. And when you put forward your value or the value of your services, that is always a challenging time. What I would suggest, and I know Matt can give you a lot more of the business stuff, but from an imposter syndrome, this is where you really need that rocket file. You really need to have a file you refer to before you speak to clients that remind you about when you went the distance with a client. That's the first thing. The second thing I would suggest is that when you're undercutting yourself, it's because you might feel there's a question that's unanswered. Are you sure that you really appreciate and understand the position of the client and you're satisfying their need? Or is there something that doesn't feel complete about it? And that could be a reason you're undercutting yourself. Sometimes what we have to do is remind ourselves about how great a job we did. Again, that rocket file idea. When I did this, I did a really great job and I deserved what I asked for and I delivered what I promised. And I think those are the kinds of statements from the coach and imposter syndrome that I would suggest. Matt, what about you?
I mean, I think it's such a good question, and I'm sure that you are by far not the only business owner out there that constantly questions their value and how much they should be charging for, especially those of us that provide a service and not a product, right? A product is in some ways much easier.
Right.
Like a widget is much easier, or if you're a landscaper. When I owned a landscape business, it's easy to price out a job, right? You know how much an hour is, you know how much the materials are, and whatnot. But if you are a therapist or a coach, or your range is can be so variant, and there's people out there at the bottom of that range and people out there at the top of that range, and I think that, you know, one of the hardest parts from a business owner standpoint is valuing themselves, because the reality is nobody in my mind, I should say, nobody in this world actually makes what they think they are worth, right? So, and I think that is true, and this might sound like a ridiculous statement. I think that is true for Jeff Bezos, and that is true for, you know, myself or somebody, you know, that's making much less than I am. Everybody's time is extremely important to them.
Right.
And so how you value that is a really hard thing. So there's a lot of stuff to kind of unpack in that statement of constantly undervaluing yourself. I think one is, you've been in business for 30 years. And if you've been sustaining or maintaining that in your life and the quality of life you want, then, well, you might be able to charge more. You're doing a great job. 30 years of business, living the life you want. That's no joke. That's nothing to sneeze about. That's something to really, as Sandy says, put in your rock pile and like rock that feather every day, right? Like, because that is an accomplishment. If you are worried that by increasing your prices, you are going to lose clientele, because, back to Sandy's point, maybe you aren't 100% sure or confident in the value of what you're providing, then there's two things in my mind to really say about that. One is, again, go back into that rock pile and say, oh, wait a minute, I've been in business for 30 years. Over 30 years, I've had X number of, probably hundreds, if not more, clients that seemingly all, I'm sure not 100%, because that would be it, but a large percentage have been happy enough that I've been in business for 30 years. And I don't know how many of those are repeat customers, but those repeat customers that are coming back to your service or to your business, that's an extra file in your rock file. When we get reoccurring relationship type of customers, that's an extra file that's like, you're doing an amazing job. So all of those things would indicate to me that you probably could charge more for your services, and you should feel comfortable and confident doing that. The question is what that scale is. If you are, let's say, $100 an hour for your services and you want to jump to 150, there's a bunch of consideration to it. Based on your experience and history and past, you probably could make that jump. Now, the considerations are, do you grandfather in your current clients? Do you slowly bring them up, new clients there's all of those things. But I think that, to Sandy's point, you've been in business for 30 years, doing what you do. I think that would indicate that you can charge more than you are if you want to, and should feel confident about that.
And I just want to add one thing to what Matt said. Have you gotten referrals? Because, when a client, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but when a client refers you, when people are happy with a service, they tell a fraction of the people that they tell when they're dissatisfied. So sometimes it's hard for us to see, but a single referral is an incredible validation because they're hooking their brand to yours. And that's an incredibly important thing. But, whether you're in business for 30 years or, you just started a business last year, the important thing is that we are all human. It is human to wonder. It's human to ask yourself these questions. And it's incredibly valuable it keeps us grounded and looking at how to improve and be better than we were the day before. So we thank you really so much for that question, because that was a great one.
I agree. Are there any other questions or any other follow-ups to the conversations that we've been having?
I just had one follow-up from this person who asked that question. A couple of them. She said, I'll start my rocket file. I need to remind myself that my experience in time is worthwhile.
Absolutely. I don't know if you mentor anybody, but I would urge you, if you've been in business a long time, you've seen the ups and downs. Even if you haven't seen COVID, you've seen a lot of things that have happened, like 2008 and other things. So my suggestion would be, if you're in an organization that is particularly used in your industry, maybe there's an industry organization, start to talk and share your experience. There's lots of blog opportunities and other places, but you've seen things that a lot of people could benefit from your wisdom, but also your questions.
I agree. And just keep doing what you're doing, because obviously you're doing a lot of things right. So, hey, if there is, are there any others right now, or we can?
No, none right now. You can forward ahead.
Thanks, Joni.
Thanks, Joni. So, what about your experience? So, I'm going to let Sandy read the quote, because this is her quote.
So this quote is written by someone that comes from a book she wrote, and it's about normal as you get it. And because there's nothing more comforting than someone who actually gets it, really gets it, because they've been to the same hell as you have and can verify you've not made it up. So that's why we would really like to have you talk about your experiences, and let us have the opportunity to potentially add something. It's not meant, neither one of us. We are not here because we're the sage on the stage. We're here because we have some great questions and we have some great ideas, but it's to be participative in a conversation that helps you.
I mean, in all transparency, I mean, you know, Sandy and I are colleagues. We work together at Goodwin. We present together at different forums, and her and I talk about imposter all the time. Not from a theoretical standpoint, from moments of when I am feeling out there on the ledge and about to fall. And I, you know, Sandy's an amazing resource for me. I have some awareness of the imposter syndrome. I've got more awareness of the business environment. And she, you know, in this concept has really resonated with me in a lot of ways, because throughout my life, you know, I've owned businesses for years, and run businesses for years. At points in my life, I have always been afraid of being found out as a fraud. That, you know, oh my God, they're going to figure out I don't know what I'm doing. Oh my God, you know, and to add to that, not to, again, in full transparency. So now I've owned businesses for years, since I was, you know, really a teenager. And now I run a business program and I still own a business. So there's even more of a sense of like, this guy should know what he's doing, which the reality is we are all flawed human beings, whether you're working for people or not that think they are. We are all flawed human beings, and nobody knows everything. And so, you know, we do all deal with this, and having supports and starting to understand these concepts has been tremendously beneficial to me.
And it doesn't matter. It's one of the most human experiences. This is really about being a human and not having the answers. But there are a number of people who are afraid to admit they don't have the answers. And one of the most freeing phrases in the world is, I don't know. Because it gives you the opportunity to step back, to not, proselytize, not be crazy, but to go back and to find out more, or to ask important questions of someone who might know something you don't. Being able to admit you don't know everything allows you to also be accessible to other flawed human beings, just as flawed as you. So,
and vulnerability is not easy, especially vulnerability when we are supposed to be the ones that know things, right? Whether it's your business, whether it's parenting, whether it's whatever it is, like we are not expected to be vulnerable. And being vulnerable, to be honest, there's people out there that take advantage of vulnerability.
Absolutely.
So it's being vulnerable is vulnerable, but it's also a way to move forward and through those uncomfortable feelings,
right,
by accepting and working through them.
Renee Brown has done some really cutting edge work in the area of vulnerability. She's written a number of books. Dare to Lead is one of them. She even has her own coaching program that's focused on this. But what she says is vulnerability is one of the most courageous things you can do. You have to be incredibly brave to be vulnerable, to show, where you're not so sure. And so common questions, things that come up, when people can say that, they can say, I don't really know the answer. Does anybody have anything they could add to it? It's incredibly important. This is one of the things that happened yesterday, is that it was a great question. What if I don't have IPS or imposter syndrome? What can I learn from it? So I found this absurd little picture, and they'll find you out. This is all the things people worry about. I just worked hard. I'm a fraud. One of the things is that if you don't have IPS, good for you, because somehow you have been able to nurture and sustain yourself, your sense of self, and your belief in what you know. Chances are you have allowed yourself to be vulnerable at times, because people who block themselves off from being vulnerable are probably dealing with this in a larger, focus. But what can you learn from it? What you can learn from IPS is that all of us are not sure about something. We all skin our knees. I love remembering that Walt Disney went bankrupt 7 times before he met Mickey Mouse. And I also love remembering that when he did meet Mickey Mouse had really ugly clawy hands, and his wife said, no one will like that mouse. And that's why there's white gloves. And also his wife added the fact that he was originally going to be named Mortimer Mouse. And nobody felt that Mortimer or Morty was going to be impressive. She's the one that suggested Mickey. So, and Mickey Mouse's birthday was November 18th. So it seemed like the appropriate thing to bring up.
Well, and I think that's so cool. And I think that the reality is there's so many examples of that. There's so many examples of success based on quote unquote failures, but the failures are learning, right? And I think that one of the problems with today's world is we live in a world where we see a Facebook, we see an Amazon, and all we see is this tremendous growth and success that seemed like it was overnight. Jeff Bezos was not Amazon overnight. He struggled. No. He struggled for decades to convince Wall Street that he knew what he was doing. Mark Zuckerberg got, may not have had all those struggles, but he had some. But you look at Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren went through multiple investors prior to becoming Polo. Sam Walton, one of my favorite quotes is somebody asked him how he figured out the formula for success for Sam's Club in Walmart, and he said it was easy. I messed up thousands of times, right? But if each of those mess ups, you learn something, and the next time you don't do that same thing, you mess up in a different way. But if you continue to figure out where the mess ups are and start to consolidate those, eventually you get to where you're going. So I think that's an important thing to remember.
So Joni, do you have are there any questions that are coming in that we should potentially deal with? We just have a few minutes left.
I'm not seeing any right now.
That's fine. Thank you. And thank you so much, Joni, for helping us. You and Luke helping us. We really appreciate it.
Well, I enjoyed every minute of it.
Oh, thank you.
I've been taking notes.
Thank you. Thank you. So here, if anybody has questions, that come up or that they're thinking about and they don't want to put out in this forum, our email addresses are right here on this slide. They're also in the handout that you can download. Please, Sandy and I are very accessible, very responsive, and we'd be more than happy to continue a conversation with anybody offline. So again, our contact information is right here, and we really appreciate you joining us for today, and if you were with us yesterday as well for both days, and we look forward to hearing from you.
And I just want to remind you, we still have a couple of minutes left, so if anybody wants to put in a last-minute question, by all means, put it in so that we can answer it. And as Matt said, we love continuing a dialogue. Matt and I talk all the time about a wide variety of things. But if we answered a question of yours and it didn't satisfy you or it piqued another question, don't hesitate to reach out. We really would love to hear from you. And we can offer you some readings on your own if you're looking for that, or a conversation. So we thank you very much, and we are very grateful that you spent your time. We understand how important it is with small businesses. Every minute counts, and to have spent all these minutes with us is a real compliment, and we really are grateful.
Yeah, and we also just want to thank the Better Business Bureau for having us. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Sandy. Be sure to check out our event sponsors as well, including Goodwin University, by going to our sponsors tab on the event site at betterbusinesssummit.com. You also still have time to sign up for our next breakout, which is our consumer priorities driving your messaging. That's going to be at 1 o'clock. See you then. And thanks again to Matt and Sandy.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.